So as we have more listeners, this is live from France Square in Yerevan. Today is Tuesday, June 14, 2022. We're waiting for Hovik to situate himself. He's got a couple of guests, and he's going to give us an update on the protests from the day's events. In the meantime, I urge you guys to listen to the latest podcast, which I think I put out 6-7 hours ago. It was a conversation with Hrant Mikhaelian, and it's a good conversation. It's a good conversation. This one, when we talk with Hrant, when we talk with Benjamin, these are not just opinions that we hear. These guys go and meet with a lot of other analysts in the region. Hrant had spent the last 2 or 3 months, mostly out of Yerevan, talking to people in Russia and Tiflis, other places. And we hear the synthesis, the informed synthesis, the conclusions that they make from all the conversations they're having. So sometimes they're not just very direct, but they are always informed and thoughtful, and there's something between the lines.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, Hovik. Unless your guests are waiting, I think you should give us an update on how the day went and what you heard from the leaders.
Well, in my opinion, what was going to be said here is not a surprise to those who have been following, those who have been present. Let me begin by basically summarizing a Facebook post from Garen yesterday, which was, starting from, I guess, Saturday, Sunday, there were various interviews and public sort of statements that essentially sort of heralded like these upcoming steps. And what I would call steps would be, as a summary, I would say these are not like, this is not a retreat, but more of refocusing and retooling of the process. Considering, I'm sorry?
A regrouping?
Well, I said retooling, essentially, like trying to figure out how to sort of adjust the tactics. Okay, I'm going to mix different parts. So the only thing, from my judgment, if you're on the street and if you're 2, 5, 10, 20,000, the only thing you can do, especially during daytime, is, cause disruptions. You could try to take over, let's say, government buildings, and that's going to lead to violence. Now, what Nikol had in 2018, that the current opposition doesn't have, is, Nikol probably had a complacent government who was not ready for what was going to happen. In my opinion, everyone was shocked, and by the time everyone figured out what's going to happen, it was too late. Here, the government knows what's going to happen because they know that tool set very well. They know that methodology very well. So they're going to provide resistance. We saw once, the protest near the radio house, for instance, what Nikol basically did just by by 20, 30 people kicking the door in and going without any resistance. Even as we approached, we saw layers and layers of police. So all government buildings are guarded all the time, and there is a high likelihood of violence, which was not there, I think, in 2018. And one of the things that Ishkan said, when he said, people want more determination from the opposition, and Ishkan said, if the determination means leading people to bloodshed, then yes, we don't have that determination. Yeah, so our guests, are on their way. But
Okay.
Oscar, you were saying something?
Hovik, I was saying that if we measure determination by the willingness to put Armenians on Armenians for violence, assassination, and things like that, that is the wrong measure to think about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not gonna say everyone agrees with me here, but at least the opposition is determined about that determination, that definition that you described. Okay, so before going to what Ishkhan said, there was an interesting Facebook post by Garen yesterday, which I think summarizes from I wouldn't. Garen Vartanyan is a very a core member of the organizers. He's definitely a supporter. So he basically said that what this protest movement has gotten successful so far is creating an infrastructure where the leaders have experienced guiding people on the streets, marching, and and the protesters also have experience in friction with the cops. What to do, what not to do. I think that's very, very important. The number two thing is that the communication mechanisms, the networking that was created during this protest. Like, for instance, I can recognize a lot of protesters by face now, and a lot of leaders by face. I think that also is an intangible value when you're building up a movement like this. And across different across different segments of the political spectrum. Obviously, the failure is that what you mentioned is that we weren't able to, or the protest leaders weren't able to get 200,000 people on the streets. But what is also known is that from various polls, we know that at least some of the messages of about the protests, some of the messages from the protests, like Artsakh cannot be part of Azerbaijan, and they are supported by 90% of the Armenian populace. So yes, the discrepancy between the 90% who do not support Nikol when it comes to the agenda of Artsakh, and only I don't know, 10, 20, 30,000, however many that show up, and that is the failure of the opposition so far. And that was recognized both by both by Ishan Sagatelian in his speech today, and it was recognized by Garen Vartanyan in his Facebook post. And I mean, it's obvious, right?
Hovig, it's interesting that you bring up the level of support for Artsakh. Yesterday, when I was talking to Hrant Mikhailian for our podcast, we reviewed one of the latest survey, the Caucasus Barometer survey, which one of the questions was about leaving Artsakh in Azerbaijan. 94% of survey takers said never.
Right. So that's a discrepancy. That's an objective measure, between the people who do not support Nikol on that point, or people who are against that point, and the number of protesters on the street. Whether it's because people are trying to fantasize that that's not going to happen, or they just don't trust the opposition. That's a different matter, and that's something that I think the opposition needs to work on. But I think a lot can be said. So, so let me, I guess, summarize what I got from Ishkhan Sagatelian's essentially speech today. So, number one is that yes, tents are going to be removed. The justification for that was that at this stage, tents were very helpful, and this creating this atmosphere in France Square is going to be very helpful for the continuation of the protest movement. But having a daily presence here, especially in the 40-degree heat of summer, in the summer heat, may not be the most opportune or the most efficient way to do this. By any means, what I got is that the protest movement will continue in different ways, such as there will still be a rally at least once a week. I think that's going to be on Saturdays. We know that this Thursday, for instance, there's going to be, during the daytime, there's going to be a march, which also sort of just carries this opportunity that it can blow up at any point and it can bring in more people. I mean, at least that's my understanding. So Iraz Ekman march on Thursday. Ishwan Sahatyan also said that the movement will start moving towards institutionalizing this process, forming region like different committees and so forth. I was actually marching with Christine Vartanyan, the member of parliament, and I asked her directly, does this mean that also setting up shadow government? And I think that there is no political consensus, from what I understand, on what a shadow government means and what its mandate will be. I'm going to make live income. On August 2, the other interesting point brought up by Ishwan Sagatelian was that August 2 marks the 1-year anniversary of Nikol Pashinyan's power, which means that another tool set becomes available to the opposition, which is the vote of no confidence in parliament. And I don't know how much they will rely on that, but at least I understood it to mean that that's one thing that to be considered. Another thing I heard was that the opposition should work on nominating I think I heard this, I may be mistaken, so if anyone was watching or listening, that the opposition should start working towards nomination of a prime minister candidate.
Okay. One thing I want to ask you a question about the vote of no confidence. Does that mean that the opposition is planning to go back to the parliament?
I think that it cannot happen without the opposition going to the parliament. Yes, so that's what I heard as well. And within the background of that statement, meaning the nominating an opposition candidate for prime minister, afterwards, Ishwan Sagatelian talked about responsibility. When who is going to be responsible if this movement fails? He said the movement will not fail, and he takes, if it comes to responsibility, then he takes both political and personal responsibility for everything, and he and his friends. But I don't know. It sounded like those two things about opposition nominating prime minister candidates and him taking responsibility were placed very close to each other in the speech. So I don't know how much I should analyze into that, but
Hovik, again, yesterday when I was talking to Hrant Mikhaelian, this was a topic about the faces that are in the opposition that would be candidates. And two names that were mentioned were Arman Tatoyan and Avedik Chalabian. Are those names in the mix? Is Arman even part of the movement?
No, I don't think Arman right now he's staying away, and or at least sort of he's not staying away, but he's not staying outside of politics. At least that's the current stance. What I said on I think last week, was it Friday, when Harash Jabryan was on
5 days ago.
I asked so people are looking for the third party candidate, right?
Yeah.
And I'm in favor of the argument that if a third party candidate has not materialized so far, there is no third, in my opinion, and we'll hear our guests as well, there is no third party candidate to be had. And I don't know how, if Arman Tatoyan decides, my own opinion, and I respect him dearly for all of it, what he has done, but I don't know if next month he says, you know what, I'm going to start leading the opposition now. When all of this happened, all these people were brutalized, were beaten, were arrested. I don't know how he's going to explain what he was doing when this was all happening. So I think, at least for me, that's really important to understand. But I think that definitely Avedik Chalabian is a good candidate, especially his arrest, his unjust arrest is definitely contributed to that. But instead of me speaking, which you guys hear me a lot, perhaps we can turn over to our guests. And I have Garen Mgrditchian first with me today, and he's he was on one of our lives previously. He's a international finance expert in investment, and you should definitely go back and hear the live that we had with him. And the other guest that we have is okay. So far I just got in. I wanna turn over to you and get your thoughts on so far. A lot of people are disappointed. Some, that I spoke to actually. For instance, I was walking with Khachatur Grigoryan from founder of GG, and he was of the opinion that things must go on and the show will go on. But what is your opinion of the state of the movement so far? And feel free to, yeah.
Thank you, Hovik, for hosting me. I agree with Khachatur in the sense that I think many of us didn't come to this with the illusion that it's going to be happening overnight. The 2018 precedent, in my view, was something totally different, where foreign powers were in sync in trying to bring in a government that would do their bidding. And they used every lever possible to bring Nikol Pashinyan to power. And we're seeing the result of that strategy, of that policy right now, unfortunately. This is purely a locally groomed movement, and that's why its task is harder than the previous time. But I think the movement has achieved significant milestones that they mentioned today from the podium. One is that it was clear that there's a very large number of Armenian citizens, and also from Artsakh and the diaspora, who are opposing the defeatist policy of this regime. During many of the marches, the crowd numbered close to 40,000. A few days. This was a few times, and that means that there's many more who are not coming to the street but are of the same view. In fact, there was a Gallup poll, I think, last week that was published, and which indicated that close to more than 90% of Armenians in Armenia oppose having a status of Artsakh as part of Azerbaijan. That is something big. That is a big achievement, especially that it shows that this government doesn't have the mandate to be speaking on behalf of us, the majority of Armenians, when it comes to pan-national issues such as the status of Artsakh, such as ceding territory from Armenia's territory, and the issue of the genocide and Armenia-Turkey normalization process. The second item was that the international community essentially got notice of the fact that things are not normal in Armenia, that this government can't really sign away our rights. And I think that was also a factor in the third milestone, or the third kind of fruit of this labor, which was a delay in the expected signing of many of these capitulation agreements. The second part, which was going to have to do with the corridor in Syunik, the status of Artsakh. Nikol Pashinyan himself indicated he was ready to accept in his speech in Parliament. So I think those three achievements themselves are good enough in themselves. The side benefit in all of this, in my view, has been that many people got to know each other. Many people who share the same view about the fact that Nikol has to go, and we need to start building the post-Nikol Armenia, a strong, modern state harnessing all of the resources we have in the diaspora in Armenia and Artsakh. Those who have, in fact, Armenia's interest in mind got to know each other and there's a platform now in which they can come together, they can work together, they can develop their common vision together. And in fact, Hovik,
I was going to say, and some of us found out that we're neighbors with each other, very close,
So we got to know each other through this movement and many
next
others.
door neighbors, except next top floor neighbors.
I also met a few whom I call my Perman Yekhbairs, which is my brothers in detention, because I met them through when we were in police custody, and afterwards we met during the marches by chance. So I'm this is not an easy struggle, but this is a real renaissance of sorts, and I think this will happen in phases. People. There's a number of people who are going to be thinking about what the message of this movement is within the next few weeks, within the next few months. I think this movement will grow. Maybe it'll morph into something different, to something larger, in order to be larger, in order to have more people join the movement, and that's a positive. That's a positive.
So the other guest around our table is Garine Hovsepian. She is Dean of Law of the Faculty of Law at the French University in Armenia. But I will let her also introduce herself and why she is here and what her thoughts are about what happened and what we discussed so far.
Thanks, Hovik. Hello, Asbet.
Hi there.
Hi. Thanks for inviting me to the talk. Just to say that I'm obviously speaking on my personal behalf and not in my official function in my day job. I don't know. I think Garen summed up a lot of my thoughts. I think as much as there's a lot of positive in what happened in the last month and a half or 2 months, I do think that an ice has been broken in many ways. In Armenian, we're saying laon zartnir. But so in that sense, it is positive. I think people realize that at the minimum, there needed to be an expression of disapproval of strong disapproval of the direction in which Nikol was taking the whole fate of the country and the Armenian people, and that his lies were not acceptable between how or what platform he ran his elections on and what he is actually saying today. So when you compare the promises he made, or about Artsakh status, about who's going to decide on the fate of Artsakh and how transparent he's going to be, he did none of that. What was in this platform. He's respected, and on the contrary, he's doing the exact opposite. And I think at a minimum, people have expressed strongly, both on the streets and outside, the fact that there's a certain red line that is not acceptable. So that is great. And I think the point is that the number of those who believe that there is a red line and he's crossed it are greater than the number of those who are actually coming out on the street to protest actively in that sense. There's a greater number out there. I meet people constantly who in many ways say, they're glad to see there's people on the streets protesting. They're always wondering what's going to happen. Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? But somehow there's an obstacle between moving from the point of being against Nikol Pashinyan and his policies, and where there's a lot of people who are saying outright that they are against and they do want him to leave. But somehow they're not taking the next step, which is well, then what? You need to express your voice in some way, and something is holding them back. Some are just simply passive and don't believe in their own strength of being able to change the direction in which this is going. Others are just sitting on the fence, afraid to be disappointed yet again by any new leaders that they trust, and that's where I think that you cannot be scared at this point. You have to have the courage to say no to what is obvious that we need to say no to and fight against, and not be afraid of what's next, because ultimately it will always be in the hands of the people to decide what's next. But I feel that there's still a lack of trust in any new leader, because a lot of that segment of the population has been disappointed one too many times. And our challenge is to find a way to convince or to give them the strength to express their disagreement now, and remain involved again enough to be able to decide what's going to happen in the future steps.
Any questions from listeners for Garine? So Garine, what is your feeling about the next steps? We were just talking a little bit earlier about how the opposition wants to move from here. What's your take on how things should be moving?
Well, I think one front on which we need to work a lot is people still don't have a vision of what could be different, what could be done differently, what could be next. What would a national government, transitional government of national unity look like? How does that work? Would it be possible to really change the course of things? So I think that aspect hasn't been discussed enough, explained enough, so that people can actually start envisioning that it is possible, that there are directions. So reaching out so that those points are clarified and they reach a significant amount of people from all strokes of life is I think key. That's one key point, because you're going to be able to, that's one point. Second is addressing some of these fears or concerns or obstacles for which this the person sitting on the fence, as we can call them for some in some ways, what is more important, and how to get them to take a decision now, and stop being not indifferent, but scared or passive. So addressing some of their legitimate concerns, I think, in a more direct way, and sometimes they're just exaggerated fears, but they're not put into context. And unfortunately, we're at a point where we need to make choices, because inaction is worse at this point. So I think those are the two directions: looking to address some of the concerns of those who are somehow hesitant to join actively the movement, even though they agree that something needs to change and Nikol has to leave. And second of all, really giving a better sense, a better idea of what the longer term steps can be in the immediate future, and giving hope for generally a brighter and stronger Armenia, even in this course, the opposition, because what the opposition right now is fighting for is exactly that: a strong, independent Armenia.
Garine, on that point of getting people who are, let's say, fence sitters and everything, I have a question for you that is perhaps a little more personal. You know, over the last year, we have seen opposition sympathetic people get elected as mayors. There have been rectors and whatever, and we've seen the civil contract, the ruling party, um, taking retribution on these folks, right? Jailing them, harassing them. Number one, are you afraid when you come out to express your sympathy or your support for the opposition? Are you afraid for your job? And is that an issue for a lot of people out there?
Personally, I'm not, because personally, I'm not, because I work in an institution where I believe that there's certain values, and I have the right to be active politically outside of my functions. I'm not promoting anything within my functions, but I have the freedom of assembly, of association, of protest, and of political opinion. So I'm personally not afraid, but I might be. My situation might be a bit different, but I do think that a lot of people are afraid, and they're not afraid just like that theoretically. There have been, I know some of my friends who have been very active, who were working in government or quasi-government institutions, and they were asked to leave recently. And
Yes,
others are being pressured. Others are being pressured through their, aunt or uncle who are, working in such. So definitely, people are worried and afraid because unfortunately, the system is such that you can be exposed to that. But that's something we need to fight against as well. And that takes more time. That's more sensitive. But it just goes to show that. The level of democracy and freedoms in Armenia are not such that you can express a difference of opinion, and even in politics, but not at the risk of your job. Unfortunately, that is a big factor. But that's also why we need to, I think the challenge is to find ways so that people can express their voice without necessarily exposing themselves. But that's where you need to have other types of systems that protect those individuals, or that expose, especially when it's government or government related institutions that are doing that type of pressure. So definitely it's a factor.
Of course, you have the right for free assembly and expression and all that stuff. But one of the things I'm still concerned about is that many of the processes against people, like, for example, there were mayors who were elected lawfully last year in June, and they were not allowed to go to do their jobs, like Arushanyan and Mamigonian. Those are not legal things. So I'm afraid that this government is not shy of doing illegal things to prevent. You are, so I think you are the dean of the law school at the French University, correct?
Yes, Asbet, but as I said, I'm speaking on my personal behalf and not in my function. The French University.
From a legal perspective, and not from your job perspective, from a legal perspective, how do you deal with these issues?
Well, this is one of the hardest things to prove in a. I mean, it depends. There are different cases. There are different types of scenarios. So, wrongful dismissal. I mean, when it's related to work, wrongful dismissal is often very hard to prove, because they will. The employer will often find an argument to base their reasons for. In the reality in Armenia, what happens is that they come, they tell you, listen, we're going to have to fire you. Maybe if you don't want to have it on your record that you were fired, perhaps it's better that you resign. And a lot of Armenians will do that. They will resign themselves in order to,
of course,
not have on the record that they were fired for XYZ reason, which would impact their future. So it is very difficult from a legal point of view to prove in court. Now, cases for politicians like the mayors in question, that's a little bit different. That might be actually perhaps on one hand easier to prove, because there you do have politicization, or using even if at face value some other basis for arresting or detaining, that those cases are easier to prove. But you would need to go through Armenian courts and trying to argue those issues. And as much as we hate to admit it, unfortunately, there are still some courts that are, or some judges that may still be not independent enough, or still be under the influence of the executive. And in this case,
if I may say something there,
go ahead, Garen.
this is Garen talking. One of my the concerns I have is um, how twisted is the way the Armenian court system, or the Armenian quote unquote democracy, is being portrayed internationally and in Armenia and among the diaspora uh, through parties and bodies that are actually meant to be protecting the transparency and the functioning of these systems. Um, I was in the past. I was in support of all these initiatives financed by foreign governments, foreign entities, in support of human rights in Armenia, in support of democratic development, civil society development, and all that. Unfortunately, after the war, it's been clear to me that these initiatives have in fact been used as levers to effect and for geopolitical ends, unfortunately, and because of the very obvious double standards that we're seeing with foreign embassies not really expressing a word about all these abuses that you've mentioned, all these NGOs that were supposed to be protecting human rights, democracy, transparency of the judicial system, or speaking against the abuse of the judicial system for political means. Not a single word has been expressed from all these bodies. Instead, they're busy promoting the government's satellite as a strategic milestone. You wonder, what they know about these things. Instead of doing their job, they're busy really propping up this government. And unfortunately, that's really unfortunate, because these values of democracy and human rights and freedom of assembly and freedom of speech, protection of human rights, are really things that, I for one cherish, many of us cherish. But when you start seeing a double standard, then people start taking a more cynical view of these values of democracy. They get they get the impression, or maybe it's the right impression, that these are actually being championed only for when it serves the interests of a certain specific geopolitical scenario. So it's unfortunate. I think it's about time that we start seeing civic actions that are locally groomed, that are locally financed, or at least financed by diaspora Armenians, not foreign governments. And when I say foreign governments, I don't mean necessarily only the West. It doesn't really matter whether it's Russia, it's the States, or Europeans. At the end of the day, we need local initiatives, locally groomed initiatives, in order to create this, to really protect these values that we all cherish, and on which really depends on Armenia's democratic development at the end of the day.
I've also been surprised at how quiet all these NGOs have been throughout the opposition protests and everything. It's just been extremely quiet. Nobody's speaking up. And frankly, this is maybe just a statement, a rant from my side, that all of the money that has come to Armenia as aid from the EU, the US, whatever, we can see it deployed protecting the streets against the protesters. It's the Red Berets, the Black Berets, etc.
Yeah, and not only have they not been silent, but they've actually been misinforming diasporans and the public at large. Making posts about the fact that the opposition has resorted to mass violence. Like I was there personally on the march on June 3rd during that scuffle. There was a peaceful protest. We were just trying to pass through the chain of policemen that were blocking our constitutional right to pass through the streets. Same way Pashinyan did back in 2018. Same way I did back in 2018. So people like these El Profesor, I call him, posting things about mass violence and others retweeting those and really spreading misinformation. At the end of the day, I think they're passé. All that, these NGOs are already passé. The real future in Armenia is among the youth who are working together and discussing together the future of Armenia and how they're going to build the strong and modern state we've all been looking for. At the end of the day, that's what really matters, what's happening in the streets of Yerevan and among youth circles in the diaspora.
And
are there questions from listeners?
While listeners respond, I wanted to also add to that. I think it was yesterday where at the stage here on France Square, they dissected one of the articles that was written about the opposition, calling the opposition participants I guess what is the movement, the sort of
millionaires,
the resistance of the millionaires, or something like that. Besides the scandalous title, there was actually many places in the article itself where there were sort of false statements, and I'm glad that false statements were aired, and I'm glad that the protest movement is conscious about this, and they gave space for Hovsepian Ishkhanian, who was on this live previously as well, to talk about that. And that was that article was printed by OC Media, one of the sort of Sorosakan, or one of the foreign-funded media outlets. It's not even in Armenia. It's I think in Georgia, or it focuses on the Caucasus.
Yeah.
I don't know what the expands to, but anyway, unfortunately, we have seen that we are almost alone. None of the international media, none of the foreign-funded local media, none of the regional geopolitical states, with the exception of maybe Azerbaijan and Turkey, have an interest in how this protest movement ends. And that's why I think it's really a homegrown movement. And the challenges are more, but I think that this is basically an incubator for a true national movement that is native to Armenia, in my opinion. Yeah. So, any questions? Edmond, you're eerily quiet.
Everybody's very quiet today. I think maybe they're digesting. Even Edmond Savella is quiet. I think he was having some trouble digesting what he heard from Ishkhan Saatelyan. Hovig, I took a moment while you were talking, mentioning OC Media. There are a lot of organizations that you might know already are supporting and funding them. Open Society Foundation, European Endowment for Democracy, the UK Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and more. I won't read them all.
Yes. But in reality, I think that from the sense that I got, I did see some disappointed people, especially, and some of these people are in Armenia and they're active on social media. But I don't know, Garen, do you if they have are you at any point going to stop coming to this protest? So did your motivation level drop at all from what happened today or from what was happening? To me, it was written on the wall that this is going to happen, but I wanted to also ask you, was today a surprise to you?
Today was not a surprise to me. It was from the outset. I did not have. I mentioned earlier the expectation that Nikol was going to leave power, quietly and easily. This guy, um, this guy is going to be grasping to his seats till the last minute. That was clear from the fact that he didn't resign back in November 10th. Any self-respecting leader would have resigned back then, and we wouldn't really have to choose between him and some other former presidents during the elections. Had he done so, we would have come together as one nation. We would have formed a unity government on November 11th had he not failed to deprive us of the opportunity for renewal and of that unity. His whole credo during his reign and in his past has been to divide people, to divide the nation, and that's one of the worst crimes that this regime has really done to us, in my view. So I was not really expecting that this is going to be easy. I was not expecting that this is going to be quick. Um, Obviously, it would have been great if we had achieved our aim by now. But this is a not long term. I don't think it's going to be taking years, but I think it's a struggle in phases, because people are now aware, first and foremost, of the fact that they can effect change. It's obvious that this government doesn't have the power that it pretends to be having. 50,000 people on the streets in Yerevan, day in, day out. It's not normal. We have a crisis in the country. As much as they try to portray it as normalcy, that's not the case. And these types of political crises, they have to be resolved in one way or fashion. And you can't put this under the rug. They're in a state where they really have to give in at some point. And again, that giving doesn't necessarily mean that the opposition candidates have to become prime minister right away. No, this is more about forming a political movement in which we collectively try to figure out a solution to this crisis. At the end of the day, I think everyone's aim, even the leaders of this opposition, in my view, they're sincere when they say that we want unity, we want things to be changing, we want Nikol gone so that we can protect our country, our homeland, and we can build the Armenia of the future. I think they're sincere when they say that we need a unity government. And unity government doesn't mean that only the candidates of the opposition are going to be present. I think it's possible that some members of the Inkyle faction or the Kiba faction defect and join that unity government. It's possible that you have figures like after this movement, when it's clear that there's an element of disapproval of this magnitude, that people like Ruben Vartanian, hopefully, maybe Arman Tatoyan, Avedik Chalabian, when he's freed, they may become the forces that coalesce others, and this really becomes a united effort. So I think kudos to the opposition and the leaders of this movement for having triggered this wave of disapproval. And I think once they already announced that they're going to be focusing on talking to people in the regions, on really addressing the need to be having discussions with different groups of people so that they can allay their concerns. Garen Vartanesian, one of the political commentators in Armenia, he's come up with a number of suggestions that the leaders of this movement actually seems to have embraced. One of the things that I liked about this leadership, by the way, is how open they have been to different suggestions by different people, which shows that at the end of the day, they're not there to just portray themselves as the leaders. They're not there just to promote themselves, but they actually mean what they say when they say that they really want to get, at the end of the day, what matters is really the protection and defense of our homeland.
Okay, great. Hovik, Okay, so we have no questions. Where do we go from here?
Well, the immediate answer to your question is on Thursday there will be a march during the daytime. So on Saturday, I believe the 18th, is that the Saturday?
Yeah.
There will be the again a rally at night. So. And I think and things will materialize as so. So the next step is I guess for people to be ready for any signal that Nikol Pashinyan may be again sort of willing to make moves and concessions in negotiations with Azerbaijan, to listen to statements from opposition if there's a need to go and rally or march on a particular day. And longer term, I still think that we had some hints about what may happen and how things may happen, but I don't think even the opposition knows. Are they going to go the route of no confidence? Are they going to sort of build up momentum again and again close off the streets? It all remains to be seen. But the other things that are challenging, and for me, it's not. It doesn't matter. But this 40-degree weather that we're expecting in the summer is not gonna it's gonna demotivate some people, and it's the fact that we have to be at terms with. So maybe we have to wait until fall. I don't know for things to really ramp up, but really maintain the pressure throughout the summer. And I don't know. I mean, we just want to.
We may have a question from Edmund.
Yeah, and by the way, with regard to this format, I'm actually going to try to be here at France Square regularly and talk to different people, perhaps without the crowd being here. But I think that as long as there are guests that we can invite, we will have we'll try to sort of keep the momentum alive that way. And as long as there's sort of or even just make it coincide with the rallies that the opposition movement is planning on having.
And we'll try and schedule these as far in advance as we can, and also promote them both on Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah.
Edwin, you have a comment or a question?
Yes, hi. It's a statement rather than a question. In my opinion, let's not go cling on the weather and all of what's happening and everything. To this day, I'm going to explain it. The opposition part were not clear about who's going to be PM, who's going to be the MPs, it's organization. It's an organizational stuff, in the government, which they wouldn't be clear, and unless the opposition they don't get new faces like Arman Tatoyan, for example, and these kind of people. I don't know. I'm very disappointed, by the way. I don't know if we are going to get somewhere with it.
Hovik?
And I'm not going to discredit all the opposition. The opposition did an exemplary work on how to discredit Pashinyan and the government and everything. However, in fairness to the opposition, we are against the world. The EU is siding with Pashinyan, the US, the Western countries, everyone is siding with Pashinyan. And my worry is to turn Armenia a country like Georgia. Thank you.
Well, there is all this danger, and it's an uphill climb, right, for the opposition. They knew, and we knew, this is going to be a tall order to bring him down. They even said that even going from 25,000 to 75,000 or 150,000 is not going to bring Pashinyan down. So there will have to be a different
Yes, yes.
A different event.
That was my main argument from the beginning.
Yeah.
From the beginning, my main argument is as the opposition MPs, which they went to the street, and in fairness to them, they did a massive job. You know, some of them were arrested, some of them they risked their lives. By the way, they did not only risk their lives, they risked the lives of their families as well.
But, Edmund,
But their job is to be political inside the National Assembly.
so please listen to the podcast we published this morning, because in it we were talking about one of the achievements by the opposition, which is very important, in that a couple of months ago there were constant and weekly statements by Pashinyan and his government about the kind of concessions they were planning to make. They were preparing the ground to make those things. Now they're not as much, right? We always have the fears that they might be doing, but their dialectic has changed completely.
I am going to view a very minor example, for example, of the opposition. For example, you know the issue of Berzor.
Yes.
Right. The issue of Berzor, it wasn't the opposition who brought it to light. It was someone called Nairi Hokinian, which is a journalist actually.
Yeah.
And he's with the opposition, by the way.
Well, Hovig is probably going to bring him on with us at some point.
And Nairi, I know him personally. Actually, I know him. He was one of my students actually, and he's the one who brought the issue into the light. My issue was with the opposition. Okay, you're going to the street, you're doing everything, and it's an exemplary job, but why you didn't bring this issue? Why you didn't bring this issue out on the table, for example? And the opposition MPs, it's their job to be inside the National Assembly and to question Pashinyan and his government. Why this point 1, 2, 3, including Berzor point, why they haven't been answered? Thank you. By the way, that was my statement.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's
your thoughts on that?
I think that's valid criticism. I think that Nairi Hokinian was everyone was talking about it. That road can be seen every time you pass through Lachin. You see that road being built. I think that maybe raising alerts, raising the alert about it could have been done earlier. Although I think earlier in the week, Ishkan Sagatarian did raise that statement. But yes, Nairi Hokinian was the first one. And maybe that's a valid question. Could that one point have been handled better?
But let's mention, Hovig, also that the alerts being raised and all that stuff, that is part of the November agreement that was signed. So this is not a surprise.
Well, and so the question is, it was part of the November agreement in terms of that alternative road needs to be built.
Yes.
No. Let me correct you. Let me correct you. Sorry. Let me correct you. Berzor, the passage from Armenia to Artsakh, which is called Lachin Corridor, right? Mm-hmm. And the village surrounding it, they weren't in the November 9 agreement, by the way.
Yes.
November 9 agreement says that Artsakh is... The November 9 agreement says wherever Pashinyan ceded the land to Azerbaijan, but there's going to be a corridor which is going to be a land-based corridor. No one spoke about bridge, and no one spoke about the village which goes around the area.
Exactly. So the exact route of the alternative corridor was not specified.
That's right.
And that's where I think, we need to put pressure and say that, that's where there's a suspicion whether, Azerbaijan has built this. Now, did Nikol Pashinyan agree with verbally with Aliyev already, and this is being built that way, which many people sort of assume by default, yes. That's a separate issue that I think we really need to discuss.
And actually, in fairness to me, for you, Hovik, for Asbet, for everyone like us, regular people, not politicians, if you look well into I'm talking, I've been working in journalism since 94, if you look well into the November 9, not only November 9 agreement, again the January agreement as well, it's kind of vague. It doesn't specify. For example, I'm going to just give you a small example. For example, when you listen to someone, a pro-government, for example, they want to get Artsakh status, for example, right? And in their Artsakh statement, for example, they say, actually they don't name it Artsakh, they name it they name it Nagorno-Karabakh, which is the first mistake, by the way. Because, a few years ago, we had a massive referendum in Artsakh, and everyone decided to call it Artsakh Republic, not Nagorno-Karabakh. This is the first mistake. The second vague mistake, which the government put it forward, which no one understood it as well, which come in November 9 agreement and January agreement, which they say that Artsakh should have some kind of status, right? But in their statement, they didn't put what Artsakh means. Is Artsakh means what? We lost during the war, for example, we have Stepanakert, Martakert, and everything, or when they say Artsakh has to have a kind of democratic, a kind of independent country within Shushi, Hadrut, Ganzachech, they haven't specified
So
it.
you're talking about the borders of what is called the Artsakh.
Yes, of course, yes.
That was never specified.
This was a kind of vague from the Armenian government.
Yeah.
So when you listen to pro-government people, they say, oh yes, we want the Artsakh status, we want Artsakh to be independent. Okay, but hold on, which Artsakh you're talking about?
Yeah.
You're talking about Artsakh, which is only Stepanakert and Martakert and this kind of region which stayed with us, or you're talking about the legal borders of Artsakh, which includes Shushi and Hadrut and Shamunyan and all the areas which has been invaded, which had been occupied by Azerbaijan. So we have to be very, very careful. And this comes back for the opposition MPs, which they should be questioning the Armenian government in the National Assembly. They need to ask this kind of question. What does Artsakh status means to you? And this question, which I have been asking since since we lost the war.
Yeah, they have been unable to force any kind of a vote on this in the parliament. That's correct. But going back to what you were saying about raising alerts, I guess the alerts should be raised because in the agreements it was not fully specified exactly how these alternative roads would be constructed. And so they were, I think, deliberately left up to negotiations or what have you. You and I and other people, possibly most of the opposition, does not know what was negotiated behind our backs, right? That's the issue.
Yeah, yes, indeed. And this is where it comes the job of the opposition MP to specify it with the government.
Right.
I mean, for the last 2 years, I have been writing, doing articles, even in my work, at the BBC, that was a really funny incident where we were doing a small report on the Caucasus, and one of the producers asked me, "Oh yeah, what do you guys mean by status of Artsakh?" And I just turned out like an idiot to him. I said, "Sorry, I don't know."
Okay. Hovik, back to you.
Yeah. So I think this is a good time to close. We've been more than an hour at this. Thank you everyone for your input. I would like to ask, if you're listening to this now or afterwards, please follow us, Grung, on Twitter. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and really important that you follow us on different podcast platforms such as Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and rate us on those platforms, because for us, on those, we really can't promote ourselves on those platforms other than our listeners listening to us and rating us over there.
And also, before we hang up, a round of thank yous for Garen Mgrditchian and Garine Hovsepian for being with us today.
Thank you to our guests as well. And we'll be here again sometime, probably Thursday, but we'll announce it ahead of time.
All right.
Cheers,
Thank you,
everyone. Okay.
Talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.